This is the brief on AI Decoded. Think of this weekly show as your very own universal translator, taking all that intimidating tech speak and turning it into practical, everyday language for folks without a technical background. First, we need to look at who this is actually for, because their core mission is to make artificial intelligence finally click for non-technical users. Since we aren't all programmers, the show acts as a strict filter for information, which really makes you wonder, if AI systems are so profoundly complex, how accessible can they genuinely be for an absolute beginner? Well, second, we see how the two hosts answer that by aggressively filtering the noise, separating what's actually useful.
Imagine you're just exhausted. It's a rainy, miserable Tuesday in October, and you've just worked a grueling 12-hour day.
Oh, the absolute worst kind of day.
Right. And then your phone buzzes with a calendar reminder that says, post to social media.
Yeah, that is a rough moment.
It really is. And if you're relying on motivation in that exact moment, you're going to swipe away the notification, collapse on the couch, and do absolutely nothing.
Completely nothing. And the stack of notes and research we are unpacking today suggests that this exact moment is actually the graveyard of professional success.
Which is wild to think about. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we're exploring a really fascinating set of strategies regarding professional social media presence and personal branding.
It's some incredibly practical material.
Definitely. And our core mission today, for you listening, is uncovering the absolute most important trait for long-term social media success.
And you know, we should probably just spoil the ending right now.
Oh yeah, let's just drop the big reveal.
Yeah.
The secret isn't unmatched creativity. It isn't raw charisma, and it's definitely not a fancy Ivy League degree. It's exactly what you do on that rainy Tuesday.
Exactly. It's the sheer discipline to show up consistently when inspiration is just completely, totally absent.
Which is so hard.
It is, but it is the ultimate separator. Consistency is what divides the accounts that steadily grow from the ones that they hit a wall and eventually just fade into the background noise.
Yeah, they just disappear.
Right. But we tend to view consistency purely as a motivation issue. You know, we set daily alarms, we stick those cheesy motivational quotes to our monitors.
Oh, Post-it notes everywhere.
Yes. We try to hype ourselves up over a morning coffee, but in practice, consistency is almost entirely a planning problem. Motivation is a finite biological resource.
It absolutely will run out. Okay, let's unpack this because I think this is a trap so many of us fall into.
Oh, for sure.
Relying on motivation to post on social media feels exactly like relying on motivation to cook a gourmet 3-course meal from scratch after that 12-hour workday.
That is such a good way to look at it.
Like, if you walk into your kitchen and the ingredients aren't already chopped, portioned, and sitting right there next to the pan, you're not going to cook.
No way. You're going to grab your phone and order takeout.
Exactly. Or, you know, in our social media equivalent, you're just going to post nothing.
That is a perfect parallel, and it perfectly illustrates a core concept from psychology, which is cognitive load.
Cognitive load. Okay, explain that a bit more.
Sure. So imagine sitting down at your laptop. You have the heavy pressure of needing to post something right now, today.
Right.
But at the exact same time, you have to decide what topic to write about, what format it should be in, what specific angle you want to take.
And how to write an opening line that actually stops people from scrolling.
Yes, all of that. That is an overwhelming, almost paralyzing amount of decision-making happening all at once. The cognitive load becomes entirely prohibitive.
Because it's just too much brain power required on the spot.
Exactly. Human nature dictates that when the mental path is that steep, the path of least resistance is to just close the laptop and say, I'll do it tomorrow.
Which we all know never, ever happens. Tomorrow just becomes another exhausting day.
Right.
So if relying on motivation is a trap and cognitive overload is the enemy defeating us before we even start typing, there has to be a structural fix here.
There is, and it's a big one.
And looking at the sources, it points to something that sounds almost deceptively simple, which is the content calendar.
Yes, the content calendar.
But I want to really dig into what this actually does, because I'll be honest, when I hear content calendar, I just picture a boring spreadsheet. And a spreadsheet doesn't exactly scream creative genius.
It doesn't, no. And that's exactly the point. The mechanics of why a calendar works are profound, because a content calendar does not magically make you more creative.
Okay.
It simply front-loads the creative decision-making to a dedicated planning session. You sit down to do this at the start of the week or maybe the start of the month when the pressure to publish is completely off.
Because you aren't trying to post right that second.
Right. That means your decision-making can be deliberate, strategic, and calm instead of purely reactive.
So the ingredients are being prepped on Sunday, so Wednesday's dinner is just effortless.
Precisely. And to be actually effective, this calendar needs to cover at least 2 to 3 weeks of runway. But, and this is key, it cannot just be a list of vague ideas like, talk about the housing market.
Oh, so not just a rough outline.
No, a functional calendar specifies the exact topic, the format, like whether it's a video or a text post, the category, and ideally the literal opening hook.
Wow, down to the opening hook.
Yeah. When you do that prep work, the cognitive load drops to absolute zero when that rainy Tuesday rolls around. The only decision left for you to make is executing an idea that is already fully fleshed out.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here because I know what you, the listener, might be thinking right now.
Let's hear it.
When I hear plan a whole month out down to the opening sentence, my brain immediately pushes back. Doesn't spending hours mapping this out make us rigid?
That's a super common reaction.
Like, doesn't it make the content feel robotic and kind of disconnected from reality? What if something massive happens in our industry or a huge news story breaks overnight? Aren't we just stuck posting irrelevant, pre-scheduled stuff?
What's fascinating here is that this is the most common fear professionals have, but it stems from a total misunderstanding of what a calendar actually is.
How so?
Well, a calendar is infrastructure. It is not a rigid commitment, and it's certainly not a straitjacket. Good infrastructure actually allows for brilliant improvisation.
Okay, I'm going to need an example for that.
Think about jazz musicians.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. They can improvise beautifully because they completely understand the underlying structure of the music.
Oh, that makes sense.
If a timely industry event happens or, you have a fantastic client interaction on a Thursday morning that sparks a great story, you pivot. You pause the scheduled post and you write about the new thing.
Right, because you have the space to do that.
Exactly. Improvising your content in the moment is incredibly easy when you have a solid baseline to fall back on if the inspiration doesn't strike. But trying to improvise your overall direction and your daily content from scratch every single day, that is the exact formula for professional burnout.
So you have the safety net built, which means you can afford to try the trapeze act if the moment calls for it.
That's a great way to put it.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, an empty calendar is just as intimidating as a blank screen if you don't actually know what to fill those little daily boxes with.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, how do we know what kind of content actually generates business? The research we were reviewing maps out a very specific architecture for this. You can't just throw up random thoughts. The content has to serve deliberate functions.
Yes, and they need to be in deliberate proportions. The ideal mix outlined in the strategy is the 50-30-20 rule.
The 50-30-20 rule.
Right. This ensures you're building an audience, earning trust, and generating revenue without, alienating people.
Let's break that formula down.
Right.
Because looking at the notes, half the pie, the 50%, is educational content.
Right. Half of everything you publish should teach your audience something genuinely useful.
Okay.
This is the content that earns saves, gets shared, and builds what economists refer to as a proof of competence.
Proof of competence. I like that phrase.
Yeah. It is an ongoing public demonstration that you actually know what you're talking about. When a potential client is deciding whether to hand over their money, their baseline requirement is knowing you can actually solve that problem.
And educational content answers that question proactively.
Exactly.
So that's the 50%. The next bucket is 30%, and this is labeled as trust content.
Yes, trust content.
As I was reading through this, I realized this is really all about humanizing the brand. We're talking about client success stories, but told entirely from the client's perspective, right?
That's a crucial distinction.
Yeah, not just you taking an ego trip about how great you are. It includes the behind-the-scenes reality of your workday, your personal story of why you do this work, and the vulnerability of sharing your core beliefs.
And I really want to highlight that word vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because that is often the hardest hurdle for professionals to clear. Many people aggressively resist trust content because to them it feels unprofessional.
Oh, they think they need to be perfectly polished all the time.
Right. They prefer to hide behind the armor of pure, detached expertise. But the psychology behind how people make hiring decisions is incredibly consistent. People hire people they like and trust.
They don't want to hire a hyper-competent robot.
Exactly. Trust content builds an emotional connection, and emotion drives action far faster than pure logic.
Okay, so we have 50% education, 30% trust. That leaves a surprisingly small 20% form, offer content.
The sales pitch, basically.
Right. This is where you actually say, here are my services, here is my product, here is how you can hire me. And I really have to push back on this.
Go for it.
Only 20% for selling. I feel like most professionals, especially if they're hungry for growth, instinctively want to pump that number up to 80%.
Oh, all the time.
Because it feels like the most direct, logical path to making money. Why is the sales portion so shockingly low?
It's an ironic pitfall. I mean, it feels completely logical to push the sale as often as possible. But think about your own scrolling habits. When you see an account that is constantly blasting promotional flyers, what do?
Oh, I scroll right past it immediately.
You instantly tune them out. Audiences have highly calibrated radar for hard pitches, and they avoid them. The professionals who post the least promotional content actually generate the most inbound inquiries.
Wait, really? So by not asking for the sale, they get more sales?
Exactly, because of what the other 80% of their content is doing.
Yeah.
The educational and trust content builds massive, undeniable demand.
Ah, I see.
By the time that rare 20% offer content finally shows up in their feed, the audience has already decided they want to work with you. You've already proven you're smart, and you've already proven you're trustworthy.
So the offer just provides the logistical path for them to hand you their money.
You got it.
Yeah.
You are creating the demand long before you ever ask for a decision.
That completely flips the traditional marketing mindset on its head.
It really does.
So what does this all mean? We know the recipe, 50% education, 30% trust, 20% offer. But knowing the recipe doesn't mean I want to chop all those ingredients myself.
Right, back to the cooking analogy.
Exactly. We need a sous chef to prep this so we aren't staring at a blank page. And the notes introduce using AI, specifically Claude, as the ultimate infrastructure tool to build this calendar.
But we need to be very careful here.
Why is that?
Because the goal isn't to just open Claude and type, write my social media posts for the month.
Right, because that just spits out generic, robotic fluff that sounds like a corporate brochure.
Nobody wants to read that.
No one. To actually get value here, it's all about how you brief the AI. You have to provide Claude with a rich, detailed foundation.
Give us an example.
Okay, for example, if you just say, write a post about real estate, Claude gives you a Wikipedia-style summary. But if you give it a brief that says, I serve first-time homebuyers in Austin, Texas. Here are the specific fears they have about interest rates. And here's a literal question a client asked me yesterday about waiving inspections.
Yes. That is perfect. When you feed that kind of rich context into Claude, it has boundaries and mechanisms to be specific.
It knows exactly what you're trying to achieve.
Right. It can then generate a full month of varied formats, unique angles, and strong hooks based on your actual reality. It gives you a fully formed, highly targeted starting point to refine.
But once you have that brilliant core idea from Claude, there's a massive trap waiting for you.
Oh, this is a big one.
The materials call it the deadliest multi-platform sin, the cross-posting fallacy.
The absolute deadliest.
This is when you take that perfectly refined post, maybe tweak a hashtag, and blast the exact same thing across Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok.
It is the fastest possible way to guarantee your content underperforms everywhere. Every single social platform has its own operating logic, its own algorithm, and its own unique culture of engagement.
It's like wearing a tuxedo to a beach bonfire.
A tuxedo to a bonfire. I love that.
Yeah, like it's a great outfit, beautifully tailored.
Mm-hmm.
But you completely fail to read the room. You're going to look totally out of place, and no one is going to want to interact with you.
Exactly.
We need to break down the dress code for each of these major platforms so we know how to translate our ideas. Let's start with Instagram. What is the psychology of that platform?
Well, Instagram's culture is inherently visual and aesthetic. Think of your profile grid as a curated gallery.
Okay, a gallery.
When a user visits your profile, they make a subconscious judgment in mere milliseconds about whether you're worth following, based entirely on that visual impression.
But the text still matters.
All right. The text absolutely matters, particularly the first line. Captions on Instagram can be quite long and personal, but that first sentence has to work incredibly hard to earn the see more tap.
Ah, right. And there's a crucial behavioral detail in the notes about Instagram, too. Treating your comments like absolute gold.
Yes.
If someone takes the time to type a comment, that is a high-effort action. Replying to them thoughtfully and, crucially, doing it within the first hour of posting isn't just a nice human courtesy.
No, it does so much more than that.
It acts as an algorithmic amplifier. It signals to Instagram's backend that a real active conversation is happening, which pushes your post to more feeds.
Exactly. Now, contrast that entirely with Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook is fundamentally community-oriented.
So what does that mean in practice? Because I always assumed Facebook was just like Instagram, all about the photos and videos.
Actually, the mechanics are incredibly different. Broadcasters, like people just shouting their message from a business page, they die on Facebook. Community members thrive. The strategy here is showing up in local groups or industry groups and being genuinely helpful without any promotional angle. And the data shows something highly counterintuitive.
What's that?
Plain text posts featuring a personal narrative heavily outperform highly produced image posts.
Wait, really? Plain text over a great photo?
Yes. The Facebook algorithm prioritizes community conversation. A text-based first-person story forces people to stop and read, and it naturally prompts people to reply with their own stories in the comments.
And that engagement signals the algorithm to spread it further.
Exactly.
Okay, so Instagram is the visual gallery, Facebook is the town hall. What about LinkedIn?
LinkedIn has a distinctly professional analytical culture, but, it's evolving.
How so?
The content that wins here today is honest, highly specific, and slightly contrarian. People on LinkedIn are exhausted by corporate buzzwords. They respond to posts that challenge the conventional wisdom of their specific industry.
The notes gave a great example of a hook for LinkedIn, something like, the most common mistake in our industry that nobody wants to admit is...
Perfect hook.
Yeah, that kind of specificity pulls back the curtain on the corporate spin. It builds an audience that feels like they're getting insider raw knowledge.
Precisely. And finally, we have TikTok.
The Wild West.
Right. This requires a completely different adaptation because it's less about your writing and almost entirely about your production and physical presence.
Okay.
The delivery has to be radically naturalistic. If you maintain a stiff corporate composure on TikTok, you will look like a company advertisement, and users will swipe past you in half a second.
So you are a person talking directly to a friend on FaceTime, not a broadcaster reading a teleprompter.
Exactly.
So-
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the cross-posting workflow isn't about exhausting yourself creating 4 completely different ideas every single day.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. You develop one core educational or trust idea. Then you use your AI, like Claude, to adapt it natively.
Okay, walk us through that translation.
The Instagram version becomes a highly visual carousel. The LinkedIn version becomes a 400-word contrarian narrative. The TikTok version becomes a 45-second informal script. They all stem from the exact same root idea, but they respect the dress code of the room they are in.
That is such a powerful shift in perspective. Instead of doing 4 times the work, you do one piece of work 4 different ways.
Yes.
But here's the trap that jumped out at me. If your tone is highly visual on Instagram, hyper-analytical on LinkedIn, and totally casual on TikTok, doesn't the audience get whiplash?
That's a very fair question.
Like, how do we prevent this platform adaptation from completely destroying our core identity? That leads us straight into the final, and I think most misunderstood, dimension of this strategy, which is the personal brand.
It is usually the piece professionals figure out last, but it's the one that pays the absolute highest dividends over a career.
I have to admit, when I was reading through these notes, my entire definition of personal branding got flipped upside down.
Really? How did you define it before?
Well, I always assumed it was about picking a slick color palette, getting a nice logo designed, and maybe a catchy slogan. But the research argues that is totally backwards, right?
Completely backwards. Your logo and colors are just visual expressions of a brand. The definition provided here is much deeper and honestly a bit intimidating.
What is it?
Your personal brand is the answer to the question. What do people say about you when they refer you to someone else?
Wow. What they say when you leave the room.
Yes. What is your actual reputation in the market? And the secret to a powerful reputation is the power of specificity.
Meaning you can't just be everything to everyone.
Exactly. Successful personal brands are hyper-specific. You aren't just a personal trainer. You are a trainer whose approach to fitness for people over 40 is genuinely different from the mainstream.
Right.
You aren't just a realtor. You are a realtor who serves a specific cultural community based on deep personal experience.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because the notes explain how to use AI to figure this out.
This is such a great hack.
We are so close to our own lives that our unique traits just feel totally normal and boring to us. But if you take your raw background, the specific types of clients you absolutely love working with, your core values, and especially your contrarian industry beliefs.
Yes, the things you disagree with the mainstream on.
Right. And you feed all of that into Claude. You can ask the AI to distill a definitive brand statement for you. It acts as an objective mirror.
And once you have that brand statement, it becomes the ultimate filter for everything you do. It's a living, working document.
How do you use it day to day?
Before a single post goes onto that content calendar we talked about earlier, you run it through the filter. Does this actually reflect who I am? Does it speak directly to my specific hyper-niche audience? Is this something no one else in my space is brave enough to say?
And then once that core identity and voice are completely locked in, that is when you bring in the visual consistency.
Right. The specific colors, the chosen fonts, the consistent editing style on your photos or videos.
The stuff people usually do first.
Exactly. Those act as a passive recognition mechanism. When someone is scrolling at lightning speed through a feed, they should inherently recognize that a piece of content belongs to you before they even read a single word.
It's just a feeling they get.
Yeah, and it doesn't require hiring an expensive design agency. It just requires making a definitive choice and having the discipline to stick to it.
So let's pull all of this together. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
We really have.
The overarching truth we've extracted from these notes is that social media success isn't black magic, and it certainly isn't random luck.
Not at all.
It is a knowable, executable formula. It's a combination of absolute clarity of your specific brand, the discipline of showing up consistently when motivation is dead, the strategic quality of your 50-30-20 content mix, and the patience to let the compounding effect work over months and years.
That's the formula right there.
And with AI tools removing the friction of the blank page, the excuses for not executing are kind of gone.
The infrastructure is entirely there. The cognitive load has been lifted. The only variable left in the equation is the human being at the keyboard.
Exactly. You, the listener, now have the exact blueprint to stop agonizing over what to post every day and start building that undeniable public proof of competence. You don't have to be overwhelmed anymore.
This raises an important question, though, and it's something I want you to really think about after we wrap up here today.
What's the question?
Think about your own professional life. If your entire content calendar was wiped clean today, and you were only allowed to publish one single sentence that perfectly encapsulated your unique, contrarian perspective on your industry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The one thing you believe with absolute conviction that most of your peers completely disagree with, what would that sentence be? Because once you find that one sentence, you have found the true, unshakable foundation of your brand.
What is your one sentence? Take that thought, chew on it, and bring it into your very next planning session. Because the next time a tired, rainy Tuesday in October rolls around, you'll be ready. Your ingredients will be fully prepped, your calendar will be set, and all you have to do is show up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
This is The Brief on the AI Decoded podcast. AI Decoded is a weekly show that provides actionable tech advice, and today we are looking at their broadcasting footprint and upcoming programming. You know, keeping up with AI tools feels kind of like navigating this dense, totally unpredictable jungle, which is exactly why finding a reliable guide is absolutely crucial. First, where do you find that guide? Well, listeners can expect a new episode every single week, accessible across all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. So why